Over the last 2 years, China's commercial and state-backed teams have gone from concept to repeated full-scale testing. The question is no longer whether China will build reusable rockets, it is how fast they will flood the global launch market. The movement is no longer confined to 1 or 2 labs. It is an ecosystem. Privately funded startups, state engineering centers, logistics companies, and e-commerce giants are all funding, testing and trialing reusable architectures. That breadth matters. Reuse is not a single technical trick, it is an industrial problem: engines, structures, guidance, recovery platforms, refurbishment shops, and regulatory frameworks. China is assembling those pieces simultaneously and at pace. Let us begin with one of the loudest drum beats on the launch pad this September, Space Pioneer's Tianlong 3. In mid-September 2025, Beijing's Space Pioneer completed a full-scale first-stage static propulsive test for the 72-meter Tianlong 3. Company and Chinese state media report that the test validated key first-stage systems and sensors, and that Tianlong 3 is being built as a partially reusable heavy lifter comparable in class to Falcon 9 scale boosters, with a company-stated expendable LEO capacity in the low 20 tons and roughly mid-teens tons in reusable mode. Those numbers place Tianlong 3 squarely in the class that can service large constellations and heavy cargo missions. Across the industry, that test is not an isolated headline. Space Pioneer's work follows a string of demonstrators and iterative failures, a normal pattern for rocket development, but the tempo is notable. The company has already tested platform recovery concepts and offshore static and integrated tests this year, and it is targeting a maiden orbital attempt with partial reuse trials in the near term. If Tianlong 3 proves a reliable reusable booster, the implications are profound. China would have a domestically produced, Falcon 9 class unit capable of repeated flights at a fraction of the per launch cost of expendable vehicles. Galactic Energy is another name to watch. The privately funded company that gained recognition with its small solid launcher series family is now developing Pallas, a medium-lift liquid rocket designed with first-stage recovery in mind. Pallas 1 is frequently described in reporting as a medium reusable launcher with a single-core architecture intended to return by propulsive landing using legs and grid fins. Galactic's public targets and industry trackers put Pallas 1's reusable LEO class in the single-digit tons, and the firm has repeatedly stated ambitions for dozens of reuses per booster. Industry scheduling and corporate statements placed demonstration flights and recovery attempts in the 2024 to 2025 window, with more ambitious operational targets to follow. LandSpace offers a different but strategically vital thread. After achieving a global first, a methane-fueled orbital launch in 2023, LandSpace moved quickly into higher capacity designs. The Zuck family evolved into Zuck 3, a methane LOX heavy lifter that the company says will include reusable first-stage variants. Over the past year, LandSpace has conducted multiple ground ignition and first-stage propulsion tests, and its public schedule in 2025 calls for initial orbital launches and staged recovery tests later in the year and into 2026. Analysts point out that methane engines are an attractive choice for reusability because their combustion deposits less soot than kerosene, easing refurbishment. LandSpace's stated capacity goals in the roughly 18 to 21 ton LEO class in reusable configuration target a commercially powerful niche. Not all trajectories have been smooth. Deep Blue Aerospace's 2024 VTVL style test of Nebula 1 underlined the difficulty of the landing phase. The prototype completed most of its ascent and descent profile before losing precise control during final touchdown and suffering a hard landing. Public reporting at the time emphasized that the flight was a technical advance despite the crash. The ascent, engine control, and much of the guidance sequence worked as planned. The failure highlighted a discrete, solvable problem around terminal descent and structural tolerance. Failures like this are part of a learning curve, but they also illustrate that successful landing and fast refurbishment are the toughest technical gates to cross. There are surprises, too. SpaceX, in partnership trials with Alibaba's Dobao, has tested container-based payload concepts and small-scale ignition and recovery exercises intended for express cargo. The company's Unseen-1 concept imagines a future where suborbital or short orbital hops can deliver palletized goods in a matter of hours, a radical reimagining of logistics that would reshape commercial expectations if it scales. Trials reported in 2024 and demonstrations in 2025 show that China's experiments in reuse are not limited to satellite launches, they extend to a broader class of commercial use cases. What makes the Chinese push exceptional is the concurrency of capability, multiple design families, multiple fuel choices, multiple recovery concepts, and multiple commercial models are being tested at once. LandSpace advances methane heavy lift, Space Pioneer eyes Falcon 9 class partial reuse, Galactic Energy aims for medium class frequent flights, Deep Blue pursues VTVL tech, SpaceX tests logistics use cases. That variety shortens the pathway to a market shock if even 2 or 3 of these architectures reach operational reuse. The supply curve for launches will shift dramatically. So, what are the technical fault lines? First, the landing, whether propulsive return to a ground pad, controlled ocean touchdown, or winged horizontal return, the last few meters of descent are unforgiving. China's teams have experienced both successes in controlled descent and high-profile hard landings. The pattern is iterative testing and incremental improvement. Second, refurbishment and cadence. Recovering a stage is just step 1. Inspecting, reconditioning and certifying a first stage for flight again is where cost savings actually appear. That requires tight integration between manufacturing, inspection technology, and operations tempo. Third, regulatory and infrastructure scaling. To operate at hundreds of flights per year you need recovery ports, barge fleets, certified refurbishment plants and airspace coordination logistical systems that are as hard to create as the rockets themselves. Those obstacles are sizable, but so is China's advantage, domestic demand. China launched a record number of orbital missions in recent years to service commercial constellations, state payloads and civilian projects. That internal market provides a predictable customer base for new reusable services, and several companies have explicit government and industrial partnerships smoothing regulatory and launch cadence constraints. High, predictable domestic demand shortens the commercial runway for reuse economics compared with more export-dependent firms in other countries. Let us consider timing. Public statements, media reporting and industry trackers cluster initial demonstrators, static fires, and first recovery attempts in 2024 to 2025, with limited operational reuse ambitions in 2026. Space Pioneer's Tianlong 3 static test in mid-September 2025 and LandSpace's propulsion tests earlier in 2025 underline a compressed schedule. Demonstrators now, initial reuses within 12 to 24 months if testing continues without major setbacks. That timetable is aggressive, and independent analysts caution that moving from demonstrator to routine, cost-effective operation will likely take longer. Still, the compressed window is real. China's private firms are not promising distant decades, they are promising initial operational capability within the next 2 years. What does an operational Chinese reusable fleet mean for the market? Simple, more launches at lower marginal cost. Reuse lowers the per-launch cost curve by diffusing manufacturing outlays over multiple flights and reducing the number of new boosters required per year. For satellite constellations, Earth observation fleets, and logistics plays, that spells rapid densification of space assets. In a global market, price competition from China where manufacturing scale, vertical supply chains and government-backed demand intersect could force an industry price reordering and put pressure on incumbents who rely on expendable architectures. The strategic implications extend beyond commercial markets. A high-cadence, lower-cost launch base supports military resilience, faster replenishment of reconnaissance assets, and greater operational flexibility. That is why observers frame this not merely as an industrial story but as a component of broader U.S. China's strategic competition in space. China's investments in reusable rockets are therefore both commercial and geostrategic, intended to secure capability, sovereignty, and scale. Yet nuance matters. The path from can land a stage to can fly it 25 times with 2-day turnaround is long. It will require design for quick inspections, supply chain spare parts, sensorized structural health monitoring, and conservative operational practices until confidence builds. Even SpaceX's reusability program followed a long arc of incremental improvements before routine rapid reflights became normal. China's teams are moving faster than most predicted, but they are still walking a well-trod, difficult path. Expect incremental improvements punctuated by occasional high-visibility setbacks. For content creators, investors, and policymakers watching this race, there are 3 short checklists to monitor over the next 12 to 24 months. Recovery reliability, repeated successful soft landings on shore pad or barge with telemetry on control margins and fuel reserves. Publicized successful touchdowns followed by intact structural inspections will be a decisive signal. Turnaround cadence, publicized refurbishment timelines, reflight certificates, and planned flight rates. 1 or 2 successful reuses is a milestone, a 10-flight cadence is the business model. Watch for companies publishing target cadences and then meeting them. Commercial manifests, signed launch contracts, repeat customers, and constellation deals. Domestic demand may cushion early losses, but export customers and multinational contracts will confirm global competitiveness. Imagine the market in 3 years, fleets of reusable medium and heavy launchers from several Chinese firms operating with predictable frequency, domestic constellations growing denser, and logistics pilots demonstrating high value, rapid payload movement. That landscape would drive down global launch prices and alter procurement calculus for governments and companies worldwide. Incumbent Western providers would face real pressure to match cadence and price, or to specialize in niche, premium, or regulated services. To be clear, China faces engineering, regulatory and industrial hurdles. The most dramatic gains come from successful demonstration of both landing and low-cost refurbishment. But the combination of private capital, state support, strong domestic demand and an accelerating test tempo makes the trajectory clear. China is no longer a passive follower, it is sprinting toward parity, and in some niches, it could soon lead. In closing, consider the race as 2 linked contests. The first is the technical contest, who masters reliable return and rapid reuse. The second is the industrial contest, who builds the logistics, the barge fleets, the refurbishment plants and the contracts that make reuse economically decisive. China has put both contests on its national agenda. The next few years will tell whether its teams can translate frenetic testing into sustainable operational practice. If they do, the global launch market and the balance of strategic advantage in space will shift substantially. This is not the end of American innovation. It is the evolution of a global market into a multipolar field of competitors. But it does mark the end of a long period in which reusable rockets were the exclusive domain of one nation. The era of Chinese reusable rockets is not coming. It has arrived in tests, platforms, and prototypes, and a new, high-cadence market is about to open. The strategic and commercial consequences will be profound. For 2 decades the reusable rocket became the hallmark of U.S. space advantage. The Falcon 9's routine returns and rapid turnarounds rewrote cost assumptions, and Starship promised even greater disruption. That era of American hegemony in reusability long taken for granted now faces a fast-closing challenger. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.